Do you guys want to learn how to make a game using Unity? Well, that's what this tutorial is going to teach you. Well, at least one part of this whole tutorial. I will be teaching you how to make various features of different video games. This episode we're starting basic and we're learning character movement. So, first thing you want to do, you want to choose the ground and what character you want to be your object and subject. So you can use open game art, or you can make it yourself, or I'm just going to use some placeholder stuff. So a black box that I downloaded off the internet. So I put this down. And just all I need to do, use the rect tool. You don't have to use the rect tool, but I'm just saying you can use the rect tool. Polygon collider, or you can use a box collider, doesn't really matter. I'm going to use a polygon collider for the time being. And call it ground. So, and then I want to put a new one in, make it somehow smaller. So get the outside and hold shift as well as pulling it down, and it'll move it all in a good direction, like in the same order. So there, you name that black box player. I can spell it correctly. So now you need a tag. So I have a ground tag here, which I've already created. But to create a new tag, you just press plus, go into the tags and layers, and ground, and save. But I'll just assign him the ground tag I already created. Okay. Also for your player, your player also needs a rigid body and a box collider or a polygon collider. Doesn't matter. Depends what shape. If you want a box collider, if your character's a square, you want a box collider. But if your character's a circle, you want a circle collider. If your character's some weird little tree thing, you want a polygon collider. So, get a box collider, make sure it's there correctly, fitting the actual hitbox of the thing. And then, rigid body 2D. Rigid body is for 3D, rigid body 2D is for 2D. So don't get them mixed up, otherwise your rigid body will be weird. You don't need to change anything here yet, just wait till later. So now, what you want to do is go into create, right click, going to create, and then C# script. You want to name that player movement, and you double click it. Okay everybody, so now if you have VS Code installed, it should send you to VS Code using Unity. So this layout here, so basically this part here is what element of Unity you want to use. So if you want to use, just using Unity engine is what we're going to use, because we're not using any other specific area. But for example, if you want to use the scene manager, you use using Unity engine .scene manager and then the semicolon. But today we're not using any of that, because we're just making a simple jump and movement script. So here, the void start is called before the first frame update is called once per frame. So the frame is basically FPS, frames per second. So if you have 60 frames per second, that means the update is called 60 times in a second. So what we want to add first, before the voids, we want to add some variables that we'll use throughout the script. So we'll use public float, speed, public float, jump. So a float is basically a variable that stores words. And there's different types of variables. Integers store numbers, so on. bulls store true or false. So speaking of bulls, we have to add a private bull is jumping. So private and public. So public for this means that you have to the public means that it will show up on Unity and you can customize it in Unity. So if your speed's 5, let's say, and it's too slow for you, you can push it up to 7, let's say. So private bull is jumping. Remember to add semicolons. That's the only way it will actually do the script. And then private float move. And then private rigid body. So this is calling your rigid body 2D, and you're nicknaming it RB. Now we're at the void start. So this is called before the first frame. So we want to get our RB, which is rigid body, and then we want to get its component, which is rigid body. But be careful on your capitalization again. There's not supposed to be any capitals except for the start and the D. So if you have a B in here, it's incorrect and your script won't work. It works here because it's calling the rigid body feature. This is calling the rigid body component. So now all you need to do is just add brackets and then finish it off with a nice semicolon. And then you've got that. So now what you want to do is you want to get your axis on a horizontal level, and you want to use a variable to represent that. So get your move variable and make that equal to your input, which is what key or button you input dot get axis raw. So this means your axis on like an X or Y level. So Y is up and down, X is left and right. So obviously if we're making a walking, you don't float up when you're walking. You float to the side. I wouldn't say float actually, you just move to the side. So we want to get horizontal. So horizontal. Spell it with a capital letter. And then leave a couple spaces. Just use enter. So you want to get your rigid body again and velocity. Velocity is basically your speed you want to go at. So your velocity equals your new vector 2, which is basically, I don't really know how to explain it, but it's like a ratio of your transform position on a Y or X axis. More commonly in 2D games, and 3 is used more commonly in 3D games. So vector 2 equals, so your RB.velocity equals your new vector 2 game object. It's move times its speed. So up here is its move and speed variable. So you want to times your move by your speed. And then you want to leave a comma, and then RB.velocity .y. So this is adding jumping into it, because jumping is on a y-axis. So now we put if input .get down button. Get down button is what key you press or mouse clicker you press to make an action happen. And luckily Unity has a default for the jump. If you put jump into this, Unity has the default for it. So just put jump, and it'll use it as its spacebar or top arrow key. So jump. Ooh. So jump, the end, and is not jumping. So exclamation mark is not. So is not jumping. So is jumping is just a bool we set, true or false, just to see if we're touching the ground, and we'll fix the collider before. We'll fix the collider we set on both the ground and the player and add it onto the isJumping variable. So end is jumping, and end is jumping. That means this method will happen. So rb.add force equals new vector2 rb dot velocity dot x, which is the x-axis, horizontal, and then your jump. Then boom. Then isJumping turns true equals true. So hopefully that'll fix the errors. Yep, it does. And now what we want to do, we want to assign our ground and isJumping variable to actually do something. So here, we want to create a new void. This isn't like void update or void start. It's void on collision. So when you collide with a certain object with a tag. And that's why we added our tag for the ground, per se. So on collision enter 2D. There's an automatic way of doing this, but I want to teach you guys the manual way. So on collision enter 2D, collision 2D, and other. After you do that, that just sets what your void's gonna be, and other is gonna be a collision 2D. So if you mention other in there, that's gonna be a collision. So if your other is showing up here, dot game object dot compare tag ground, which is our tag we assigned to the ground, set isJumping equals false. And then boom, we've got full script. Of course you have to add a semicolon, almost forgot that. And then boom, we've got a script that should be able to work. So we head back to Unity, and if you assigned it, well, there's two scripts, which shouldn't be happening. But if you've assigned it to your player, it will now have an option to increase the speed. So I'll set my speed as 7 and jump as 200. If you look at that, you've got it. You've got a simple player movement. Now obviously you can change these variables. If I feel like my guy is not jumping too high or is walking too fast, I can just change jumping too low. He's not jumping very high. Then we can change it again. And he's jumping higher and going slower. So there you have it. A simple player movement in Unity. So if it works for you, a subscribe and a like would be deeply appreciated. And so I'll see you in the next episode, guys. Bye.